Hello there. Today I'm going to be tasting an Australian Riesling. So this is Hochkirch Towards Laidlaws Riesling 2021. And the wine is actually made with some skin contact, so I suppose you'd call it an orange wine. So Hochkirch are a very well established biodynamic producer in the Henty region of Western Victoria. And I wouldn't say that Henty was a region that was particularly high profile even within Victoria. Where I've come across wines from Henty has tended to be in sparkling wine base, where Seppelts used to use their Dromborg vineyards to provide sparkling base wine. Henty's quite a cool climate area, it's quite a large area. Say in the western part of Victoria, it's about 3.5 hours drive west of Melbourne, and once you're beyond Henty you're almost heading into South Australia. The farm, owned by John and Jennifer Nagorcka, is actually, John is the third generation of his family to run the farm. It's a 700-acre farm, and John and Jennifer chose to experiment by planting 3 hectares of vines back in 1990. They soon came to find that organic growing worked for them, and they started converting to organic in 1995, and in fact continued on from that to start farming biodynamically in 1999. Today they have 20 acres of vines that are certified as biodynamic by Demeter. They also farm a further 5 acres for John's sister Diane, but those wines are made under the Tarrington vineyards label. At Hochkirch they have plantings of Pinot Noir, Syrah, Riesling, Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc and a tiny portion of Chardonnay. All these vines are dry farmed, they're on their own roots, and they're entirely pruned by hand. There's as little use of mechanical processes as possible here. The soils are a red-brown basalt loam over granite and clay. The region has a cool climate, and the climate is moderated by the Southern Ocean, and in fact there's very little in between here and Antarctica. So this is a good area for growing of sparkling base wines and of aromatic whites. The reds tend to be quite elegant in style. Now I have to say the information I have on this wine is fairly sparse, but it appears that they make a number of Rieslings. I've seen just a Hochkirch Riesling, and that tends to come in a fluted bottle, whereas Towards Laidlaws is apparently a single vineyard bottling. I've seen a couple of references. One is Towards Laidlaws and the other is Near Pipers. So I assume those are 2 single vineyards that on occasion are bottled separately. Now the vineyards here face northeast. We're at an altitude of 250 metres above sea level, so we're in the foothills of the Grampian mountains here. And planting was all done using a Geisenheim clone, so top quality clonal material. As far as production is concerned, everything was hand-picked. There's prolonged skin contact. I'm not sure how long that went on for, but one would assume 1 to 2 weeks at least, leaving the wine sort of tannic, phenolic. The wine both fermented and aged in tank. I'm assuming that's stainless steel with some temperature control. It's labelled as being vegan friendly, so that would suggest that it's unfined. Certainly it wouldn't have been fined with any animal or dairy products. And the wine was bottled completely unfiltered. So let's take a look at it, shall we? Now that has a medium to deep, almost sort of bronzed orange colour there. I have to say, if I didn't know that this was a wine with some skin contact, I'd be quite concerned by that colour on a wine that was just coming up for 3 years old. The wine is 13.5% alcohol, and it's forming some tears quite readily on the side of the glass there as I swirl it. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? Those aromas are high-toned, they're quite ripe, they're quite hedonistic. There's almost a sort of a slightly caramelly note. I mean, there are notes of sort of sweet orange, mandarin, very ripe stone fruit, apricot, very ripe nectarine, sort of slightly high-toned, slightly estery note of high ripeness there. Something very attractive. There's almost a sort of a slight, I mean, this wine won't have seen oak, as I say, but there's almost a sort of slight marzipan note there, which would make me think of oak barrels, but I think that is just the richness of the fruit there. Anyway, plenty going on, lots of complexity, lots of intensity. So let's have a taste. on the palate there's plenty of richness. The wine is more or less dry, but there's a rounded generosity. Again, it's almost like that very high ripeness apricot there. And then you've got a sort of a slight bitterness at the end, almost like you get as you bite into an apricot, and then there's the note of bitterness coming from the stone in the middle of the fruit. Because there's a bitter grip, some tannins, some very fine tannins, coming in towards the end of the attack there, to stop this from being too rounded and stops it being oily in its style there. I guess it's mid-weight. The alcohol seems quite nicely in balance actually, because there's a lovely freshness, and that combined with the bitterness towards the back of the palate is actually giving sort of quite a lifted, mouth-watering note. There are bitter touches towards the finish, almost sort of almondy notes. But then there's this ripe stone fruit, there's a honeyed note, and yes, there is this high-toned, rich, ripe note on the finish there. As I say, the acidity is lifting the finish quite nicely, giving it some quite good length. There is complexity, there's structure, and there's liveliness to this wine. I've seen suggestions that this might last for sort of 10-15 years. I'd assume that's an accurate appraisal of the wine's aging ability. But I do think it's a wine that would be fun to be pairing with different foods. It's just got that sort of the rich, dry note that would go so beautifully to really lift so many savoury dishes. And its acidity's good as well, so it would very happily go with white meats, it would go with heavy sauces, and yet with cheeses and things like that, I think the wine's structure would help it counterpoint sort of rich cheeses as well. So yes, I think a really interesting wine. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have enjoyed the tasting, do please press the like button. It would be great to get that vote of confidence from you. If you really enjoy our videos, do please sign up and follow us on YouTube. Do please feel free to share them with any of your friends you think might be interested. Also, we'd love it if you leave some comments. It would be great to see your feedback on the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else related to that. Most importantly, however, do please take some time. Come and join us again for another tasting in the very near future, won't you?